We are now going to begin the panel. And if you could please put the slides up on the screen. I would ask everybody to please fasten your seatbelts, buckle in, place your seats in an upright and locked position. The nearest exit might be behind you. Today, we're going to take a journey across time and space where things as you know them are not. An alternate universe, if you will, a second Earth, another dimension. And on this second Earth, there was an invasion of nerds. And those nerds fought and won. And on this Earth, the nerds rule. Journalists, meet your new overlords. That's us, by the way. Okay, you can put the... All right. Some production value. We're not messing around. We're not messing around. Some production value there. All right, I want to introduce this incredibly nerdy, wonderful panel sitting to my left. I'm going to start with Esra. Oh, Jesus, here we go. You are to my left. You are technically to my left. Esra Doramachi. How did I do? Was that good? All right, yes. Esra is at Deutsche Welle, where she does everything from, where she's a digital editor and handles mostly community. Is that right? Audience strategy, okay. We've known each other for not a long time, right? Yes, and I invited her today because we've had many, many private conversations about the way the world ought to be in newsrooms, and I thought today we're going to have a very public conversation about the way things ought to be in newsrooms. To her immediate left is Gregor Ice, who is the CTO of Data Wrapper, which is a German data visualization startup. Gregor and I met each other when he was at the New York Times working on the graphics team. And you'll detect a theme here. Gregor also has some fairly strongly held opinions about the way things ought to be. Fortunately, we are here together. To my immediate left is Emily Gologowski, who is the research director at the Membership Puzzle Project, which, if you heard Jay's keynote, you know all about the Membership Puzzle Project and what they're trying to achieve. Emily was prior to that the editorial UX director, is that right, at the New York Times, and has a background in UX and was at Mozilla before that. Emily also has some strongly held opinions about the way things ought to be. And finally, our guest panelist, our superstar guest panelist, who is a surprise but wonderful addition to this panel, who I found out was going to be in Perugia here for this conference. And I said, oh no, you have to be on this panel, because Meg Marco has some strongly held opinions about the way things ought to be. Meg Marco is currently the editor of digital content strategy at the Wall Street Journal. Prior to that, she is founder and co-founder and editor of The Consumerist, and then spent some time with The Consumerist at Consumers Union before joining the Wall Street Journal. So let's kick right into it, shall we? In our world, Earth 2, where nerds rule, I have some thoughts about how our world differs from perhaps yours. And I might describe that from the perspective of senior management. Oh, wait, who the hell am I? I'm Aaron. I'm Aaron Pilhover. I am the James B. Steele Chair of Journalism Innovation at Temple University, which is an endowed chair, which means I can be as snarky about this as I want today, which is lovely. Prior to that, I spent time at The Guardian in some fairly senior digital and business side roles, so I've seen this from both sides, and at the New York Times. But today I want to talk about this subject from the point of view of sort of senior management, from the point of view of strategy. And so I'm just going to kick off with my ranting bit, if that's okay with all of you, and then we'll rant down the line and then open up for questions at the end. So let me start with one phrase that drives me bananas, that in my world would be a firing offense, and that is an unironic use of the phrase shoe leather reporting. There is nothing more annoying than that phrase, because it means nothing. Shoe leather reporting is something that we in newsrooms tend to celebrate over other forms of reporting, for example, data journalism, data visualization, audience engagement, and that has to stop. It just has to stop. In my world, that isn't the case. In my world, we value all reporting techniques equally. We have a toolbox that is full of tools, and we use the right tool for the job. Data illiteracy in my newsroom would prevent you from getting a job in my newsroom. We are the only profession, I have said this many times, yeah, testify, exactly, celebrate, yeah. You can say an amen if you want to. You know, we can get this down, we can start this like a revival meeting if you want. I have no problem with that. We are the only profession that I'm aware of that not only tolerates data illiteracy, we celebrate it. I didn't get into journalism to do math. Well, frankly, neither did I, and I've had a fairly lengthy career as a data journalist. So let's figure this out together. In my newsroom, any reporter during the hiring process who could not execute some very simple data analysis techniques using something like Excel, do basic formulas, basic math, calculate percentage change, something really simple like that, that person wouldn't be hired. Product, technology, UX, design, these are all roles that would be moved into the newsroom in my world, or I guess have been moved. I'm falling out of character here. Sorry, I'll get back into it. In my newsroom, those are all part of what we do as journalists. They are a core news responsibility, and the reason is simple. The product is the news. We are the product. So in Earth One, the product team, the technology team, the UX, the design teams all sit separate. They sit in different parts of the organization, often different floors, often reporting to different people. That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. We are the product, and we should start acting like it. In Earth 2, we've done a top-to-bottom rethink of our products, and we've aligned our news reporting around those products. If we're doing journalism on mobile platforms, we've oriented our newsroom around that platform. If we're doing journalism on third-party platforms, we are not simply treating those third-party platforms as a place to dump our newspaper articles and then wondering why nobody likes and shares them. We're actually creating content for those third-party platforms. In my newsroom on Earth 2, we're measuring everything, and we're setting goals, and we're setting objectives, maybe some objections, and we're doing it in a structured, clear, transparent way. Newsrooms hate this stuff, I grant you. I spent 25 years in 2 separate newsrooms and probably got, no, I can tell you how many annual reviews I got, exactly 1 in my entire journalism career. That's crazy. The word strategy seems to be a 4-letter word to most newsrooms, but not mine on Earth 2. We set clear objectives, we measure against them, we know what success looks like, and we don't simply declare publication of the thing to be success. In my newsroom, journalists are starting to take responsibility for the whole business. They're starting to become educated and aware of how the business works. They understand how newspapers make money. They understand how the advertising ecosystem works. They understand why we are preferencing reader revenue over advertising at this point, why that reader revenue aligns with our core mission as a journalism organization, and why we have to think about changing our content to fit that strategy as well. My newsroom in Earth 2 is incredibly collaborative. We consider competition to be a luxury, and a luxury that we can't afford for very much longer. My little newsroom sits in a metro area. There's about 2 million people. We cover a very large city, but we aren't competing with the Dallas Morning News. We aren't competing with the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. We are all having the same problems, and we're now trying to solve those problems collaboratively. We are all sharing data, and we're sharing resources. In my newsroom, we're beefing up our data engagement teams. We're beefing up, and we're doing it by orders of many, many multiples. We're realizing that collaborative, people-driven journalism is essential, not just for creating quality journalism, but for creating a sustainable business. We understand that people who value our content are those who are willing to then pay for it or support it in other ways with their time and attention or with cash money. And we understand that they will not value our content if we're not responsive to their needs, and that people-driven news journalism is the only way to achieve that. And finally, we're doubling down on reader revenue and deprioritizing advertising-based revenue. And we're doing it for a very particular reason, because advertising-based revenue drives and advertising revenue is not necessarily aligned always with our journalistic objectives. Advertising revenue drives particular kinds of content that we don't feel is valuable to our readers, and we would prefer to be serving our readers and not necessarily our advertisers, or at least serving our readers first and our advertisers second. I have an addendum here and about 17 more of these, but I think I'm going to stop right there and pass to Emily.
Thank you. It's so nice here on Earth, too. I really love it here. I want to quickly talk about one tactical improvement that we're going to have in this alternate but hopefully soon to be realized universe, and then talk about some larger principles and characteristics that I hope to see. So the first, and this goes exactly to Aaron's point about performance reviews. One thing that our news organizations must take from other industries is 360-degree reviews, in which not just your manager, but all of the people who work above, below, and with them chime in with on-time feedback about how that person is doing, areas they can grow, and gratitude. We use crowdsourced data in our coverage every day, and so why wouldn't we bring this in to help people understand better what their contributions are and also to better retain them? I think exit interviews are a poor excuse for saying that you're listening to the people who have worked for you, and then all of a sudden to turn around and act surprised that they're burned out, that they didn't get the professional development opportunities they wanted, that they had a bad manager, and more. So no longer will suffice here on Earth, too. I also wanted to pull some notes from the New York Times, where I previously conducted user experience research, and other sites that we've studied at the Membership Puzzle Project recently. So this is research coming from talking to supporters of the Texas Tribune, Day Correspondent, the Center for Investigative Reporting, and likely, probably a publication near you, where we are coming. Over and over again, we hear 5 different themes come up that I want to make sure we embed into the design of our future newsrooms. First, inclusive and participatory. A key point here is that we stop saying audience singular, as if we had one monolithic, faceless audience, and if we just could meet them somehow, all of our woes would be solved. I want to hear us talk about prospective community members and how we are actively going out and finding the frustrations that they have with mainstream news, information and analysis needs, what it would look like to be part of a news community that fosters belonging and invites their contributions, and that we go and do something about it instead of banging our head on the wall about the pursuit of this one audience. Part of this also will be offering multiple ways for people to take part in our coverage by contributing what they know, not just encouraging them to participate in comments and then never going in and moderating or making use of the information that they share there. This means that we're going to offer more relevant, personalized ways that people can be of service in our journalism that aren't just answering phone calls during public radio pledge drives. The second thing that we will do is to be more human. This is so simple and so difficult in our business. This means that those of us behind the work will be more inclusive in showing who we are, what we're currently working on, how people can contribute to it, and where we're coming from. We have seen this work really well at Day Correspondent and other newsrooms. We and our projects need to be more transparent in showing how we make editorial decisions, how we hire, and how we spend our supporters' money. Third, humble. This idea, the concept of humility, is the single word that I've heard more in our research than any other. And this is supporters' word, not mine. I'm just echoing it back. This means we're quick to correct ourselves when we're wrong, both to our colleagues and to our potential users publicly. We recognize that we don't have all the answers. We ask for help from people who might be able to offer it. And we're eager to teach what we know, not just to our colleagues, but to people well beyond our newsrooms. Fourth, unique. We all want to produce high-quality coverage that people can't find anywhere else. But focus is what we all lack in a 24-hour news cycle. What I am eager to see the people in this room and those we serve offer is smarter and fewer takes on issues with depth and integrity that can otherwise feel really rare in our industry. Finally, considerate. Considerate about the information needs, the cost limitations, translation needs, and web accessibility considerations for people all over the world who we might reach with our products. This means creating user experience designs that make good use of our potential community members' attention. We don't distract them from what they're trying to do. We find ways to add value, whether it's in introducing them to other people on the site who might disagree with them, helping them make sense of complex current events, or completing or canceling payment. Why do I think these 5 ideas are important? Participation, humanity, humility, uniqueness, and being more considerate. Because if our current relationship with our readers, viewers, and listeners were like any other relationship in our life, romantic or friendship, we would have broken up by now. The idea of having few feedback loops, security, or a clear vision for how to deepen our relationships simply would not suffice, and it doesn't on Earth 2 either. Thanks.
All right. So I kind of have a reputation for going off-piste and not just on a snowboard, so I'm going to do that again. So this is the second time Aaron has asked me to be on a panel, and every time he asks me to do so, I think, why is he asking me? Like, I don't know what I'm going to say. And then I just, yeah, that's why he asked me. And then I just find a way. So I kind of want to start off with just like maybe a little intro background and a definition. It's like, what's the difference between a nerd and a geek? So I think you're a geek because you deal with numbers, and I'm a nerd because I know stuff like in Palazzo Colonna, there's a replica of the Three Graces by Antonio Canova, who is a 19th century neoclassicist sculptor who has this workshop in Rome. So that's what makes me a nerd. Yeah, no icebreaker. Okay, so, and so my background is not journalism. My background is political science and international relations, and I ended up in journalism just basically by being at the right place at the right time, where I was doing my second master's because I'm a nerd and I have 2 masters, and wanted to apply for jobs earlier in the curve. And I just knew someone at Al Jazeera who said, I think you can do this project. I want you to come and build this. And so I entered a newsroom for the first time. It was a baptism by fire because 3 days after I started, Arab Spring went pfft. And I ended up staying in Doha for 4 months, and it was amazing. And then after that, when I joined the BBC, again, it was for digital projects. But the thing that started to get to me more and more is I saw issues being covered, and I thought, that's wrong, that's not the way it is. And so a lot of things that I have done have been in reaction to what I perceive as the status quo. So when I go off-piste, I would say it's kind of like an artist. You always have artists pushing the boundaries and pushing the limits, and it can be very uncomfortable. But if you don't have these people who are pushing the limits, you're never going to grow. You're never going to develop. And I'm somebody who's not afraid of taking risk. I've gotten in lots of trouble for it over the years. I think I'm actually at a point right now where I am in a lot of trouble as well. But I think, and yeah, I'm going to be like honest and open about it, but I think that if you have kind of principles and ethics, you have to do it, because there's a lot of fear in newsrooms. I think there's a lot of people who think the same way as we do, but they're afraid to speak up. They're afraid because they're going to lose their jobs, or their contract's not going to get renewed, or they're going to get these reactions from the newsroom. So that's one. So I want to just pull up a slide, which is like, has anybody ever experienced any of these things? That's not the slide. Yeah. Does that resonate with anyone? Like, can I see a show of hands seriously for this? Yeah, so I'm just going to pretend that's the majority of the room. And then, you can see, like, you've got all of these people on one side with consensus, and then you've got highest paid person in the room. And I think, unfortunately, that's what kind of happens. And I agree to, a greater or lesser extent with some of these points as well, but I think they can be really, really toxic. So can we share these slides? Or can we? Well, okay, I'll tweet this so then you can see what it is. Okay, so the reason I'm kind of in journalism is because I think that you should do something that matters. And I think in journalism you're in this really privileged position where you can kind of influence public opinion and shed light on what's going on in the world. That's the reason I joined Al Jazeera, that's the reason I joined the BBC. It's also, I started off working for the UN because I thought joining the UN was the way to change the world. Yeah, we can talk about that at another panel. And I've thought about the subject over the years a lot as well, where one place that I worked was given a mandate of doing this kind of startup digital project, and they were given a $21 million budget for it. And they weren't journalists, they were all just like digi people. And the first thing that they did was make branded hooded sweatshirts. And it's like 30 to 40-year-old guys, and they went and bought skateboards because they thought they were kind of tech entrepreneurs. It's like, no, that's not what you do. And I kind of make that point because I think we're sitting here and we're like, actually, we know better, but there are plenty of people like us who either have a monopoly on the information or they've been a first mover going into a newsroom and they think they're amazing. They build up this cult of personality because they think, oh, I'm, your digital cool person. But they end up basically just creating their own fiefdom and perpetuating that little fiefdom as well and not listening to other people. So even though I would say I'm kind of a digitally disruptive person, I think you still have to have the humility to realize that there's people coming along that are going to know better than you, and your job is not to block their path. Their job is to your job is to facilitate it and help it grow. And I did a shout out last year, so I'm just going to do it again to like Inky and Blanid. So these are two leaders who think about succession, and they open the way for people behind them. And I wish a lot of other people were like that as well. And I'm going to name check Aaron and also Martin, two other people who I think are like that as well. And you should, and Raju too. So you should, anybody else here want me to name check them? Federica? Yeah, so just go talk to my friends basically. So, so what happened to these people who got hooded sweatshirts? Eventually they got kicked off the project because they were seen as being arrogant, they weren't being seen as flexible, and they were seen as people who were creating this monopoly. So you didn't mention trust, or a little bit. So I think that trust is really important, but I think also Relevance is important as well. So something that I've seen in these traditional organizations are, and I've gotten in trouble for saying this in the past, but honesty is best policy. So in digital, I see a lot of middle-aged white dudes coming in who have newspaper backgrounds, and they're like, oh, social media is advertising to the website. It's like, no, dude, social media is not advertising to the website. And as a result, they have this completely different perception of how this could be used. And again, like I'll share this story because it's happened so many times. I've sat with editors for an hour and a half showing the numbers about why things don't work, and one of the responses I got last year was, well, the reason our videos aren't performing is because our audience hasn't found them yet. But hang on, but they will in a year or two because that's how the internet works. Like, I'm not making this up, and like for me, that was the moment. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to evangelize anymore. I'm not going to fight people anymore. So last year, my strategy was to fight people. This year, my strategy is to try to make friends. Maybe I should have done it the other way around. So, like. And I've had conversations. I've had conversations here where the people that I focus on now are people who are on the journey with me, and they get it. And I'm also going for people who are on the fence, because you can convince them with numbers. So in my parallel universe, you would need to have proven results. Anya Kerr, who used to be at Facebook and is now co-founder of Neva Labs, wrote this great piece on Medium. And if you guys are bored, Google it right now and have a look on your phones, where she was talking about the best performing teams are multifunctional teams. And it is proven. I have also another fantasy idea, which I would apply to our Earth. And you know, I know it would be hard to do because of contracts and whatnot, but like keep everybody on either 2-year or 5-year contracts. So then you've built in accountability. People have to perform, and also if one or the other party is not happy, you can part ways at the end of that. And like, can you just imagine what that would do to large and staid media organizations? It would just completely shake them up. So I think that digital people aren't always the best, but I do think it's a much better system of going from junior broadcast journalist, senior broadcast journalist, assistant editor. Oh, look, you're the boss of something now without having any management ability. And I think that you need to have this complementarity between the differentiation of leadership and also management. When I was working for Al Jazeera Turk, the guy who was in charge of Al Jazeera Turk was one of the biggest successful businessmen in Turkey. And he was there because it was a political position, but he made sure to hire people. He knew editorially what to be doing, and also kind of diverse people. So I think like that's a good little introduction. Yeah, okay.
Hello. First of all, I think I'm thankful for this opportunity to talk about this alternate universe. It's very tempting, to be honest. I think in this alternate universe, we have finally solved the trust problem that has come up so often during this conference. I was actually very surprised about this. One little shout out: if you have missed the Tools for Trust panel this morning, go online and watch it again. It's my top one panel of this conference so far. Maybe we'll beat it. I don't know. So I think in this alternate universe, we have solved trust both by implementing tools and different processes, but there's also one thing that we have understood, is that there's a certain mindset that is preventing a lot of the natural ways to act, and that's, I think in hindsight we would describe it as a certain attitude, like entitlement, or you could say it's arrogance, or a certain top-down view on the world, which is had been found in some parts of the newsrooms people worked in, and there's been a lot of talk about this already, but I just wanted to add my German nerd perspective on this. So, as someone who grew up in the internet, and all of the people in the alternate universe did that, we understood that the former gatekeepers of news, they to the internet, they only look like relics from the past. And that all this legacy brand value that the newsrooms have been built over their like golden years is now irrelevant, and that the trust game in the internet starts at zero. So and a lot of people are very, very, very suspicious about what's the so-called mainstream media and its role and mission in these days. So what in that alternate universe what we did to solve this is there was a wake-up call throughout the media that this legacy dream is over and that the trust needs to be re-earned from scratch, and that became part of the core mission of all media. And there's a couple of things that help doing this, and one is just stop doing stupid things that erode the trust. That's like the first thing. So for instance, in that parallel universe, there would be no ads from political campaigns during the election season. It's just no way that people make the different distinction between who's paying for the journalism and the impartiality of the journalism. And we also learned that we need to be more serious about the journalism. And then there's one thing that is closer to my heart is I want to speak out for all the nerds in the newsroom. And in that alternate universe, we would just stop wasting the smart, talented people who work in newsrooms and who join the newsroom just for one reason, to change the world for the better. Like nerds can work wherever they want. They can make way more money in other industries, but they join they join journalism for a cause, and then we see them wasted in different, like working on back ends for live blogs, or working on finding just yet another iteration of innovative formats for sports coverage, or another Olympics, or 12 months of election coverage, and where they have a plan, they want to do something, and I think the simple solution is to just let them do it. If they want to build a database of something, let them build the database. If they want 2 weeks to work on something, let them work on it. And yeah, and then finally, there's one last thing that we have understood in this alternate universe, and that is the internet. Estra has mentioned it. A lot of people, I think, still see the internet as yet another publication platform, and that's just not what it is. The internet is a lot of things, is a lot of good things and a lot of bad things. I sometimes like to see it as a dark place with a lot of hate speech, a lot of people being themselves, a lot of conspiracy theories, filter bubbles, and in a way that's exactly the place where journalists need to be, to take this opportunity to learn about people and bring it back to the newsroom and inform their journalism. So, that's it.
Cool. Meg.
Well, I'm really happy to hear that in Earth 2, strategy is not a 4-letter word, because it's in my title. So that's terrifying. I'm really excited about that. So I just want to echo, honestly, a lot of things that Aaron said, but I think, in Earth 2, really moving product into the newsroom is really the fundamental start of something very special. And in my career, which started sort of weirdly, but I began at Gawker Media, and then went to Consumer Reports, which was a large culture change, as you might imagine, if you're familiar with those two organizations. But what the move to Consumer Reports gave me was sort of two things. The first one was access to data science and to data scientists. I sat in a hallway with innumerable sort of PhD statisticians and just this very rich history of 80 years of survey research and extremely rigorous independent scientific research and testing. And so as somebody who was, I don't know if I really was this, but I was viewed as a sort of seat of your pants blogger type, to go into a organization like that and to really learn about rigor and data from that culture was really great. And then the second opportunity that I had was to become head of product while still remaining editor. And I think that that was so important. And if anyone here has the opportunity to get more involved in the product creation process, I would really recommend that you do it, because particularly from a management and editing standpoint, there is a lot of knowledge to be had and to be gleaned from agile software development, from product managers. Being a developer is not fundamentally different skill set and task from being a journalist. They both require the same type of management techniques. They both are very difficult to sort of right-size level of effort. So there's a lot of things that one can learn just by having interactions with the product team, understanding the way that they approach problems, and bringing that back to journalism. Because fundamentally, we're all trying to solve the same problem. We're just approaching it from different functional areas, and it just makes more sense to have product in the newsroom. And so when I had the opportunity to join the Journal, one of the really fundamental motivating factors was the fact that they had moved product into the newsroom. And so that's what we're trying to do at the Journal, and it's so important. I really cannot stress enough what a transformative and important thing it is to move those skills closer to journalism. And then the second thing that we want to do in this, this alternate universe is to really stop obsessing about format. So I think there's a lot of talk about, to your point, that the internet is not just a platform, or like print is a thing that we like talk about, and like social, and those things are all different. And you know, we all have aspirations to be more cross-platform and cross-functional and to bring our journalism to life in a number of different ways. But I think it's really important to actually concentrate on the story first, and then to think about how can we tell the story in a new way and the right way. And the way to do that is to actually think about your own personal struggles and to say to yourself, what is the thing that I have been consistently unable to communicate? And we all have that. We all have that story that we just keep writing, and we keep doing an 800-word story about it, and then when we're at a cocktail party or something, we're like, did you know? Like, everybody's had that, right? And you're just explaining and trying to communicate something, but do you stop and do you say, well, what new formats are out there? What new things, new ways of expression can I use to communicate that thing that I don't seem to be able to get out in the format that I'm comfortable with? Because it's really just about being comfortable. And so then the next thing in the new world is that we recognize that digital can be legacy too. We've been doing this a very long time. I've worked at 2 organizations that have had websites since the late 1990s. So the first organization like that was Consumer Reports. They've had a website with a paywall since 1996. The second one is the Wall Street Journal. We've had a website and a paywall since, I think, 1996 or 1997. Fact check me there. But again, like, there is, you know, digital can also be a legacy platform, and we have to be realistic about right-sizing our investment in tools for journalists. And I think this is really, really important. It's a competitive advantage to have excellent tools for journalists. To think about the wonderful people that you have doing this very important work, and to give them something that is holding them back is a dereliction of duty. We have to actually think about how can we help people do their jobs better? How can we give them access to tools that are going to make storytelling great? And let's do that across all platforms and not think about platform first and then have like sort of FOMO about like, oh, somebody else is doing something with AR, or what are we doing? You know, when I hear that question, like, what are we doing about X? Like, that's the worst question. Like, what are we doing about journalism is the question, right? It's not what are we doing about AR. It's like, what stories and what problems do we have that we're not able to tell until we had this tool? And how are we able to get that tool in the hands of the people who are most capable of using it? And if they aren't capable of using it yet, how do we teach them how to use it? And how do we make that a priority? And then the last one is a little bit of my sort of love of data science and measuring, and in my obsession with that, which is just the best way I can find to express it is that in Earth 2, we're always thinking about finding opportunities to stop guessing. And those opportunities can either be in your story, or they can be on your platforms, on your owned and operated platforms, on other people's platforms. How do you look at problems and say, am I guessing? Because journalists are incredibly good at guessing. The journalistic gut feeling is like a treasured thing. If we all weren't amazing at guessing, we would not be in this job. But we can allow ourselves, give ourselves permission to try to stop guessing about some things, try to measure some things, research some things, ask people. Find different ways to ask people. Don't assume that because in the past your way of asking people might not have been as rigorous as you would have liked it to be, that you can't find a better way to ask people and a way to validate that answer. It may be a combination of a number of different techniques. You may have heard something because someone emailed you, and then you can sort of try to validate it with a soft survey that you wouldn't necessarily want to like go right out with, and then find more sources. But like that's all journalism. So if you really just say to yourself, am I guessing? Can I stop? You'll find a lot of opportunities that you would have maybe not embraced had you not asked that question of yourself.
All right, cool. Thank you all. That was pretty great. I guess you guys, actually I want to thank one person I haven't thanked yet, and that's Chris Potter, for allowing me to finally do the thing I've always wanted to do, which is to create a panel that is basically a bitch session. The kinds of things that you will hear over beer at the hotel bar at the Brufani just about every year. But I actually think it's kind of important because strangely, these kinds of issues are rarely surfaced at panels. At least I feel that way. And so this is kind of a goof, but obviously there's some pretty serious issues. One thing that I was struck by as I was listening to everybody else rant is a lot of the things that we're pointing out as not happening in Earth 1 newsrooms are considered like normal standard operating procedure in many, many other industries. And I'm not fetishizing startups by any stretch, and anybody who's ever worked at a startup in this room or outside of it will tell you that they have all kinds of problems too. But the resistance that exists in Earth 1 toward a lot of the changes that we're advocating for, I'm curious if you guys could take a shot at this. Is it fear of these changes, or is it an actual resistance? Who wants to start with that one? Ezra?
So I had a fantastic first boss at the BBC, and she had said that news is a formula, and in a place like the BBC, it has to work. You have to have a formula that is repeatable over and over and over and over again. And so when you have a big ship like that, it's very hard for you to steer that ship. However, if you have little speedboats out, you can make it. I do find that there is fear because it's different, but that's natural, right? Like any kind of change is going to, I think, threaten people because they're not comfortable with it. And I really like your point that digital can also become legacy at some point. There was an event that I spoke at in Berlin last year at Eden Speakerman, which is a design firm, and they had these tongue-in-cheek postcards at the entrance. And one of them said, "Real journalists need no analytics," and the other one said, "Always begin with no." So I took these postcards and I put them in my office, and the majority of people who came in there and thought it was serious was just astounding because these are kind of sarcastic things but I think it's very reflective of the industry that we're in. Like, I just think there's massive resistance because people don't understand, and people don't understand because usually, as I was saying, a lot of digital folks come in and they create a fiefdom. They create this monopoly of knowledge, and they're not willing to share. They're not willing to go and sit with people to actually, explain what's going on. Because to actually sit with someone and explain what's going on takes time, takes consideration, takes repetition. It really takes an investment. And I think a lot of people maybe don't have that emotional intelligence to be able to do it because they want to see results now.
Yeah. Meg, Emily, you both have come from, well, Meg, you're an innovator who has been in two progressively, possibly more legacy organizations, like super capital L legacy, right, with Consumers Union and the Wall Street Journal, where the practice, it is now the way it has always been. It seems to be, a fairly prominent thing. Emily, you came from outside journalism into one of the most legacy newsroom cultures. I'm curious what your take on this question is. Is the resistance fear? Is it resistance to change, or is it something else?
I think it's fear learned over time. So sort of the idea of consecutive lessons about safety. And I look at my 2-year-old son, and I see this happen every day on the playground. So the children who are 6 months or even a year older than him are much safer, and he is having so much more fun. And there is something, of course, there is a survival mechanism. The economic realities of our industry are real, and I am not trying to say that this is all child's play. But I think the extent to which we quickly unlearn how to take risks based on our boss's reactions are terrifying. And it simply wouldn't fly in other industries. The other thing is the sense of skepticism that we have, that we carry around sometimes as this badge. Like, the more that I express dissatisfaction with my work and the more smug that I am, the cooler I will seem. And this to me is sort of tragic. I think that a big part of why we chose to go into this business was actually that we're optimists, that we actually want to hold truth to power, and that we actually believe things can be better. But when we fail to take risks and when we let our skepticism guide us, sort of the natural ends of those don't look so good for any of us.
So I think my personality is that I'm kind of drawn to those type of organizations. Like I'm drawn to the company that sort of figured out who it was and stayed the course and was very independent and put a lot of thought into what it does. The other side of that, particularly at Consumer Reports, but also elsewhere, is that if you are very independent, it can be very hard to disambiguate, like, your own feeling like, yeah, there's something interesting happening here, like, let's explore this, from social pressure, like worrying about being samey, just like lemmings off a cliff. I know that's not real, but like, it can be very hard, and I think in those type of organizations, there's a lot of pressure on you to like maintain that feeling of independence and to stay true to who you are. And you base a lot of your sort of ego on that, like this is who we are and we are special. And it can be very stressful to say, well, maybe there's something interesting going on here. So there's that. And I don't think I think all journalists are kind of, like, why do you go into journalism if you don't kind of have that DNA of like wanting to really figure something out and like have a, access to the truth and then tell people about it and really sort of be strong and independent on that. So I think when you have so many people who are so that personality type, it can be super hard to be like, we're gonna try some stuff, you guys, it's gonna be fine, And I think that's really important, and we should be kind to ourselves and say, yeah, we're gonna structure maybe an experiment or something, and we're gonna deliberately see if this is a thing that feels right to us and is up to our standards and up to our ethics, and also a benefit to all of the people that we're trying to provide with excellent, high-quality information.
I have some breaking news. This is, and we're gonna do one. I'm thrilled to tell you guys about this, but I'm gonna open the floor so you can all join the support group here in a minute if you want to, or challenge it if you want. I'm going to start with you, Gregor. So I just got an email. Apparently someone's watching the live stream, and we have a significant consulting opportunity. There's a major metropolitan news organization, I'm not going to name it, that has asked us to each weigh in with the one thing we would change immediately if we could. So based on your time, what would be the first thing you would change if you could snap your fingers and make that change?
Like I just said, listen to the people who work in your newsroom and ask them what they want to do, and let them do it. I've seen so many developers or coders who had big plans, and they just ran against wall after wall, and it all ended the same way. They quit. They quit and left the newsroom and found something else. Tried to find some other places. Some started their own newsrooms, their own little outlets. Some found other places. Some just said goodbye, and that was the end of their crusade, if you want. So hopefully not for forever. So yeah, ask them what they want, and if your organization has some kind of artificial barriers, there's this one team over here and there's this other team over here, and you're not supposed to do this, but because that's their job. Screw that. Let them just get together. They're in the same building. They're in the same paper or publication, and let them work together.
I would just to quickly toss that. I mean, if you think it's bad in newsrooms, you can only imagine what it's like among the technology teams that don't sit in the newsrooms. And I can tell you from experience talking to the developers and the designers who came to The Guardian, for example, with the specific intent of working for The Guardian, and found themselves working in a really shitty tech job on a floor above The Guardian, effectively, fully distant from the news. And they weren't asking for much. All they were asking for is some understanding of why we are doing this thing. How does this advance the mission? I want to be part of the mission, but instead I'm just being told what to do. And I don't know, pro tip for anybody here who is on the news side, those people want to be working with you desperately. Their managers don't want that. Their managers absolutely don't want that, and their managers don't want that, but fuck them. You guys should, seriously, that was like my first few months at the New York Times, where the tech team used to sit. Sorry, now here I go. Watch out. Where the tech team used to sit, not only was it in a different building, it was a different company, and it was several blocks away. And so I just went and started hanging out with these guys, and I mean, you can imagine how distant they felt from what the New York Times is all about. They came to the New York Times for the same reason. And honestly, those people want to work with you, so go find them. Yeah, go ahead, Ezra.
Yeah, I want to kind of controversially chip in to that question that you asked, Gregor. And this is not an original idea. I listened to a podcast from Tim Ferriss, I think sometime last year. He was talking to a Brazilian billionaire who had inherited a company from his father, and it was underperforming. It was hemorrhaging money. And he decided on a Friday to basically fire something like 90% of the staff. Went in on the weekend, cleared out everything, and started over again on the Monday. And the reason that he did it is because if he had tried to do it through a long, drawn-out process, he would have never have gotten the change that he wanted. So, I mean, Earth 2, I'm not going to do 90%, I'd fire 80% of people. Yeah, and the reason is because Pareto principle, 80% of your productivity is coming from 20% of your staff. So I'm going to go and have a look at 20% of my staff who perform, and I can measure all of that. And I'm going to look for the talent. I'm going to look for the people with potential, and I'm going to just basically clean house.
Yeah, I'm just going to say for the people in the back, we might need security for Esra on the way back to the Brufani.
Okay, wait, I've got a question about that. I think the intention is good, clean house. Yeah. But I worry that if we push 80% of people out, especially in cities where there aren't other journalism jobs to go to, I worry, are we just creating a pipeline for talent, especially engineering talent, to go work for apps that help deliver lunch to people? this is a real concern that I have, and I would love to hear your thoughts on.
Yeah.
So what do those people do next? Yes, some will go create their own startups, and a lot won't.
Okay, so prevention is always better than cure, right? So you've got to have good management who basically give people feedback on a regular basis, on a monthly basis, to tell them what they're doing. So you should never even get to that point. I do believe in, if you have an employee who's failing, it's not their fault, it's the manager's fault. Because if you have good leadership, they can take any team, even an underperforming person, they will find what motivates them and they'll be able to turn it around. If you have a performance issue, unless it's someone who's basically gone and slagged you off on social media or, traded your company secrets to ISIS or something, then yeah, like you've got an ethics issue happening there. But for everything else, it's definitely management's fault. It's never that person's fault. So I would say that it would never come to that situation if management are doing their jobs, but management doesn't mean journalism that have gone up the ranks. And yeah.
I think that's exactly true. Some of the newsrooms that I've worked in, it didn't feel like, it felt like some of the brightest IQ smart people I've ever worked with, but the emotional intelligence was low. Or I think the how to be a manager was simply not something that was emphasized. Your question about that breaking news alert, the one thing that I would change is that we stop pretending that just because you read inbound email and tweets directed at you and your publication, that counts as listening to your audience members. That is a great way to only talk to your most loyal 1% of people or your most serious detractors. There is a whole other universe of potential community members you might reach if you get creative about going to them. And that's what it really means to be an active dialogue and seeking them out.
Yeah, one quick thing, and stop calling comments community. Okay, sorry. Meg.
Well, you stole mine. I was going to talk about listening, and I think I'm going to stick with that because I actually do think it's the thing that I would change. I think it's important to listen. I think listening at scale is a challenge. I think that the current methods that we have right now, to your point, emphasize two things. One, people who just need to take something out on somebody, and there's an email address, and maybe there was a lady on TV that day, and I'm not talking about myself. Yes, I am. And so yeah, the thing I would do is I actually would write back to people who would send me weird things after I did some stuff, and they'd be like, if you really kind of talked with them, it would come down to like the 5 whys of why you got that email was like, I had a really bad day and you were on TV. So for me, I don't know that is really a useful way to like interact with an audience and think that you're having a productive dialogue. I think there's just sort of like road rage, similar like kind of disconnect between your audience and you. So like the challenge, I would love for there to be a really excellent data-driven, like verifiable way to truly listen to audiences, and not just the audience that you have, not just the audience you maybe want for commercial reasons, but the actual audience of people who are impacted by what you do for a living, which is a very large community of people, most of which probably will never read what you write, will not know who you are, but it is important. It is still important to know what they think. And even if you ask them something and they have no idea what happened afterwards, as long as you treated them with respect and you actually found them and you made sure that it's sort of a nationally representative, real interaction, I think that's important. And so in Earth 2, if we have technology that allows us to find better ways to do that, I think that's what I would immediately do.
Awesome. All right, let's open it up. Who's got a question? I think we have a microphone floating around, right? Yes. So I guess we'll go, well, you choose. Okay.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. It's Sebastian from Site Online. Amazing panel so far. My question would be, on Earth 2, what would be the role for the business people and the commercial people, and how would you define your relationship and everything you took on board in your newsroom with these people who are trying to make sure that there's a positive cash flow at the end of the month?
Yeah. I guess since I was the one who ranted about that first, maybe I'll take a crack. I mean, there clearly needs to be a continued divide between the pure commercial parts of the operation and the editorial operation. I would never, ever want that to be, to be eroded to the point where it's all one thing. There has to be both to protect the commercial side and the editorial side. However, I do think there are many functions that can and should come into the newsroom, or where the newsroom is a core key partner. And the example I'd throw out is The Guardian. So The Guardian now went over a period of just over, I guess, a year and change. They went from an insubstantial number of members and donors to over 1 million now. And the people driving that, it is often forgotten or it is barely reported, are 2 editors. One is Amanda Mickle, who comes from a background of community and also of organizing. She was a political organizer, but she also launched Off the Bus, for people who remember that project from way back, one of the early citizen journalism projects. She worked at The Guardian. She worked, ProPublica. And she is driving what is effectively a business operation. She has now both product and P&L responsibility. She's the only one in the company that has both of those responsibilities, which is fascinating. And so I do think that in some cases, like membership and donations, where there is a clear alignment between your journalistic mission and the business, it makes sense to have that, have those operations in one place. And so I think it evolves, but I think there are places where it makes a lot of sense. And right now we're just doing it in stupid ways. Anyone else?
I think also stop treating newsroom staff as if they're financially illiterate, to the extent of everyone gets to hear how the company is performing on a regular basis. Everyone participates in audience development training sessions. The idea that some of this knowledge is intended only for these people and some knowledge for others, I actually think advertising and this sort of Chinese firewall has done a great disservice to the future of audience engagement, because we've made it such that certain things are the specific domain of the marketing department and I don't need to worry about them. And that is a really false dichotomy moving forward.
Hi, my name is Zuza, and I've been hearing a lot today during your super excellent panel that I'm very grateful I got a chance to listen to. But I've been hearing a lot about management, about the lack of management skills, particularly in the legacy media organizations. So what would you change? Because when I look at the structure, it hasn't really evolved since the newspaper was invented, right? I mean, it's the guy on top with the money. It's the couple of people who report. It's a pyramid structure, and it has stayed that way. Meanwhile, the world has changed around the newspaper business. So what would you change? How would you move those things around so that they work better for media?
You're in an interesting, why don't you talk a little bit about how the journal is structured?
Yeah, so I mean, the management structure of the journal was actually one of the reasons I wanted to come there, because they had made the change of moving product into the newsroom, and in my previous organization, I was able to be both editor and head of product. So I've already really talked about that, and I have to say that it's only the beginning for us, but I think it's so important because, like I said, those skills are great, and once we work with those colleagues and we start to understand that they have interesting solutions for problems that we're struggling with, then that starts to spread throughout teams. And so one of the things that I'm working on at the Journal is to start this innovation lab, and Francesco's here, who is in charge of it, and he's had some great panels here. I hope you had the chance to go to them. And part of the mission of that lab is just to provide a resource for people to come in and interact with different types of skill sets. And it's very difficult to scale that sort of interaction by reorging a company, because that's a very significant change. But if you can create opportunities where people can just work on projects with different kinds of people, like different kinds of skills, like different kinds of projects, and just take a break and think about things differently, they can take all those experiences back to their day-to-day, and they can be agents of change. So that's the way that we're approaching it, at least in my department. And it's very early days for us, but I'm really optimistic about it so far.
There's this one book that really, really influenced kind of how I lead teams and leadership, and it's called How Google Works, which was co-written by Eric Schmidt. And I don't know if this is in practice, but from everything that I read, Google, Facebook, these companies have a very horizontal type of structure. And I know it's traditional media, it's not Silicon Valley, but I think there's a reason why these companies are really big and they really, really succeed. What I used to see at the BBC are people would move into management roles and leadership roles with zero training. So if I was in charge, well actually Earth 2, I would mandatory send these people out like even for a year, so 6 months to a year, and maybe have kind of like, you know, and a work exchange program where you're going to a company and it could be a partner. I've been going on for years that public sector media should be partnering with the likes of Amazon, Netflix, etc. You could do this crossover where they're working in that commercial environment for 6 months and sending someone from commercial into a public broadcast sector so that they start to learn and complement from each other. You've got to build in accountability. I don't really see accountability at these management levels and no measurement. And a very recent scenario that kind of I went through is there is someone appointed to lead a team with absolutely zero management leadership experience, and it's turned out destroying the entire process, which doesn't inspire trust. So I would make sure that these people go out, get their management and leadership training before you're even allowed to run a team or do something like that, and make sure you have accountability built into the process from the head up. And unfortunately, like the best companies that I can point to are places like, you know, Google, and I know there's controversy, but still Facebook, Twitter, and that.
I mean, just to follow, I mean, this could be and should be an entire panel. I'll just throw out a few quick things. One, to follow on Astra's point about Google, at The Guardian we implemented, it wasn't me involved, and I thought actually at the beginning it was a frightening idea to the point of why bother, but I was so wrong. We implemented OKRs, which is a Google, it's actually Intel that Google then adopted and now uses organization-wide. If you don't know what OKRs are, do not have enough time to tell you, but what they do is they allow you to set goals at every level of the company and then understand how they cascade down from the top all the way to the bottom. And what they do clearly is they hold people accountable because it requires that you set measurable results. OKRs, they're still doing it as far as I know, but it was an amazing exercise. The second thing is to just care about newsroom management, and then let's be honest, newsroom management tends to be an oxymoron in most places. It really does, because it's not valued. And there are small things that you can do. For example, Kath Viner, who is the editor-in-chief for The Guardian, and really is one of the very, 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 very few editors I can count who care about newsroom management. She did some simple things like, we're going to post every opening we have. We're not just going to go hire our buddy from Oxford and Cambridge or Harvard or Yale, depending on where you happen to be, and then wonder why we have a diversity problem in our newsroom. I mean, and that's, you know, you laugh, but honest to God, that's exactly what we're doing, people, for the most part. Yeah, I guess I'll just leave it at that because I think we might. I think we have maybe one more quick question. What? Over here? We have
no,
here?
already here.
Oh, sorry. Okay, go quick.
It's self-organized. Two things that scare me about Earth 2. First, your use of Comic Sans, the worst font in the world.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Second, the casualty you seem to have with laying off 80% of a workforce, even you made it sound like you're doing them a service. I've been through processes like that, and this kind of process, it breaks people and it breaks brands, and I've seen it happen, and these people are very bad off. So I always have a problem when people think they can decide over hundreds of people with such surgical precision. So, and that brings me to the thing I would like to add as the often quoted middle-aged white man. I have no problem with data and accountability. I love biostatistics, and I love to look at source code. It gives me chills. But the way... But I have worked in legacy, really legacy as they come organizations, also news organizations, and the way that numbers and accountability, so to speak, were introduced were always by the business guys, people who didn't know and didn't care about journalism, and they always tried to, the advertising guys came and said, can you do stories like this and that, because then we can sell this and that, and said, but this way we'll kill the paper. And to this day, I see on the management level, even in media companies that think they are so cool and modern now because they are promoting 30-year-old women to chief editor positions. They are just driven by cool rational thoughts about things like reach and about performance, and they don't give a shit about journalism. They don't give a shit about journalistic integrity. They don't give a shit about brands, and they don't even understand brands. And it's all very good and well to do exchange programs and all that, and team training and accountability and all that. But I wonder. We became journalists because we have this warm, fuzzy feeling for the stuff we do. And my fear is that if we just focus on the technicalities, we will not find a solution to how we will get people with that same warm, fuzzy feeling into the positions of power in the publishing house that will prevent them from making bad decisions like that over and over again.
We are not talking about the technicalities. We're talking about business. I think it's really, really important to underline that when we talk about the principles of good business in publishing, they're not soft things. This is science. This is how it works to lead people. I understand the pushback, and it sounds like there's been a personal experience with the layoffs, and that is the case for a lot of people in this room, and we take that really seriously. But I think to say that this is soft and warm and fuzzy just doesn't sit right with me. I've seen so many organizations do it wrong in ways that are invaluable for the ways that all of us, I think, want to lead our teams, that I just disagree.
Good. All right. We have one more. We're going to do this real fast. I know. We're going to do it real fast. We got started so late. The other panel went way late. We got one question. One question. One question. Come on. You didn't kick them out.
Yeah, sure, that's all. Okay, really quick. My name is Mike. I work for Legacy Media. I was hired after my internship. And what we did, we had a whole new team. We had a we had a data guy. We had a developer. All sorts of people coming together to work on things, it seems great. But when I try to design journalism, I try to use tools, I always notice that they don't seem to work. They don't work on the website. When I do a data journalism investigation, it doesn't get the traction it needed because people don't understand. And they're trying and they're pumping in money because they really want to innovate the company, but they just don't seem to get the picture to make it work. So they're trying, but they at the same time they're keeping the door closed. What could I do to fix it? What could I do? What could I say? How would you approach something like that?
This is your bailiwick.
I think we should talk after this. Wait, so are you saying there are technical issues, or it's like a literacy issue when it's published and people don't understand how to make use of the information?
I think it's widespread in the newsroom. We're trying, but it doesn't seem to be picked up. Even with the planning of the content, you want to have the most traction because people work. They're putting their heart and soul in the items they make, and then people don't listen, and they're trying to publish it at 3 a.m. at midnight. But we have standards, and we really want to make it better, but people just don't seem to, to get it. They're not. The editor, the journalist.
Short answer. You should let me look at your numbers.
It almost as if old production processes are getting in the way of being able to do something new and different.
Yeah. That's exactly the problem. Yeah.
Break the processes. They're already broken.
Yeah. Right, we're gonna bow to the back of the room and call an end to this. Thank you. Thank you.
That was fun. Thank you for having us.